Did you know that in 1987 a woman in San Francisco bought what she thought was an antique music box at an estate sale, only to discover it had been playing the same lullaby every night at 3:47 a.m. for the previous owner's entire family, right before each one of them died under mysterious circumstances? This is the story of the Ebonwood Music Box, and the curse that followed it through 3 generations of unsuspecting owners, leaving behind a trail of unexplained deaths, psychological torment, and one question that still haunts investigators to this day. What happens when you finally open the box all the way? Our story begins on a fog-drenched October morning in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. Margaret Chen, a 34-year-old antique dealer, was attending the estate sale of the Whitmore family mansion, a Victorian house that had stood empty for nearly 2 years. The Whitmores were once a prominent family in the city, known for their vast collection of European antiques and their tragic history. Over the span of just 5 years, all 7 members of the immediate family had died. Heart attacks, strokes. One daughter, only 19 years old, simply never woke up one morning. The doctors found nothing wrong with her. She just stopped. Margaret had heard whispers about the house. Other dealers avoided it. There were rumors, of course, there always are with old Victorian mansions where too many people have died too quickly. But Margaret didn't believe in superstitions. She believed in profit margins and the resale value of genuine Edwardian furniture. She arrived early, before the crowds, moving through rooms thick with dust and the peculiar silence that clings to abandoned spaces. The air inside felt wrong somehow, heavier than it should be, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. In the master bedroom, on a mahogany dresser surrounded by tarnished jewelry boxes and faded photographs, she found it. The music box was exquisite, about 8 inches tall, crafted from ebonwood so dark it seemed to absorb the dim light filtering through the curtained windows. The wood was inlaid with mother-of-pearl in intricate patterns that formed what looked like twisted vines, or perhaps reaching hands. It was difficult to tell. The design seemed to shift depending on the angle. On the top, a small brass plate was engraved with words in what appeared to be German. Für die Kinder, die nie schlafen werden. For the children who will never sleep. Strange inscription for a music box, Margaret thought, but it only made the piece more intriguing. She opened the lid just slightly, and immediately, a haunting melody began to play. It was a lullaby, but one she'd never heard before. The notes were wrong somehow, off-key in a way that made her teeth ache and sent an inexplicable chill racing down her spine. She closed the lid quickly, almost dropping it. The estate sale manager, an elderly woman named Dorothy with tired eyes and trembling hands, appeared beside her. "I wouldn't take that one if I were you, dear," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That box, it belonged to the grandmother, brought it from Germany in 1952. The family wanted it burned, but they all died before they could arrange it." Margaret laughed, though it sounded forced even to her own ears. "Burned? It's worth at least $3,000, maybe more with the right buyer." Dorothy's expression didn't change. Some things aren't meant to be sold. Some things are meant to stay buried. She paused, wringing her hands. "Every night for the last 2 years this house has been empty. Neighbors have reported hearing music, always the same time. 3:47 a.m., always that lullaby. And the box was always closed when I came to check, locked in a display case, but it played anyway." Margaret felt a flutter of unease in her stomach but pushed it aside. Fear was bad for business. She bought the music box for $200, loaded it carefully into her car, and drove home through the thickening San Francisco fog, the box wrapped in cloth on the passenger seat beside her. That night, Margaret placed the music box on her bedroom dresser, admiring it in the soft lamplight. The ebonwood seemed to pulse with a darkness all its own, the mother-of-pearl inlays catching the light like distant stars in a void. She went to bed around midnight, exhausted from the long day, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. At exactly 3:47 a.m., she woke to the sound of music. The lullaby was playing, filling her bedroom with those same discordant notes that had made her uncomfortable at the estate sale. But now, in the darkness of her room, they sounded different. They sounded like crying, like children's voices woven into the melody, singing words she couldn't quite understand but that filled her with an overwhelming sense of grief and loss. Margaret sat up, her heart hammering against her ribs. The music box was closed. She was certain she hadn't opened it. The lid was shut tight, just as she'd left it. But the music continued, growing louder, more insistent. She reached out with a shaking hand and grabbed the box, holding it up to her ear. The sound was definitely coming from inside, but that was impossible. Music boxes only play when the mechanism is wound and the lid is open. This one was doing neither. She tried to open the lid to stop it, but it wouldn't budge. The box seemed to have sealed itself shut. Margaret pulled harder, her fingernails digging into the wood, but it was as if the lid had become part of the base, fused together by some invisible force. The music grew louder still, so loud now that it hurt her ears. The children's voices rising to a shriek that made her want to scream herself. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Silence rushed back into the room like water filling a void. Margaret was breathing hard, her hands still clutched around the box. Slowly, carefully, she tried the lid again. This time it opened easily, smoothly, as if nothing had been wrong. The little brass cylinder inside was still unwound. It shouldn't have been able to play at all. Margaret didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She sat in her living room with all the lights on, the music box on the coffee table in front of her, watching it as if it might spring to life at any moment. By morning, she had convinced herself it had been a dream, a stress-induced hallucination. She'd been working too hard. The estate sale, the strange atmosphere of that house, Dorothy's ominous warnings. It had all gotten into her head. She decided to research the box's history. If it truly was a German antique from the 1950s, there might be records. She spent hours online, digging through import records, museum databases, and collector forums. What she found made her blood run cold. The Ebonwood Music Box had a history that stretched back far beyond 1952. It first appeared in documented records in 1897, in a small village in the Black Forest region of Germany. It had been crafted by a toymaker named Klaus Bergmann, known locally as a master craftsman, but also as a man touched by tragedy. His 3 children had died during a scarlet fever outbreak, all within a week of each other. Consumed by grief, Klaus had spent months locked in his workshop, emerging with only one creation, the music box. According to local folklore, Klaus had made a bargain with something in the woods beyond the village. He wanted his children back. He wanted them to live forever. What he got instead was the music box and a curse that would follow it through time. The first family to own the box after Klaus's death was the Holsteins, wealthy mill owners. Within a year, all 5 of their children were dead. Mysterious illnesses, accidents. The parents went mad, claiming they could hear their children singing every night, begging to be let out of the box. The mother eventually threw herself down the mill's grinding wheel. The father hanged himself in the barn. The box passed through 7 families over the next 50 years. Each time, the same pattern emerged. Children died first, then the adults. Always preceded by the music playing at 3:47 a.m., always leaving behind survivors who spoke of voices in the melody, of feeling watched, of dreams where small hands reached out from inside the box, begging to be freed. In 1952, the box disappeared from German records. Margaret now knew where it had gone. The Whitmore grandmother had brought it to America, probably unaware of its history. And now that history was sitting in Margaret's apartment. She should have destroyed it right then, burned it, thrown it into the bay. But something stopped her. Perhaps it was denial. Perhaps it was the small, rational part of her brain insisting that curses weren't real, that this was all coincidence and superstition. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. Something that whispered in the back of her mind that she needed to know what would happen if the box was opened all the way, because Margaret had only ever opened it part way. The lid lifted about an inch before stopping, as if held by some internal mechanism. What if she forced it open completely? That night, 3:47 a.m. came with the inevitability of death itself. The music started again, and this time Margaret was ready. She grabbed the box immediately, determined to open it to see inside to end this nightmare once and for all. She pulled at the lid with all her strength, and slowly, agonizingly, it began to give way. The music grew wilder, more frantic, the children's voices rising to a fever pitch of desperation or perhaps warning. As the lid opened wider, Margaret felt the temperature in the room plummet. Her breath came out in visible clouds. Frost began forming on the windows, and in the growing gap between the lid and the base, she saw something that made her heart stop. Fingers, small, pale, impossibly thin fingers, were reaching out from inside the box, pushing at the lid from within. Not mechanical fingers, not carved wood. Real fingers with tiny fingernails and skin so translucent she could see the delicate bones underneath. The fingers multiplied, dozens of them, scores of them, pressing against the underside of the lid, desperate to escape. Margaret screamed and slammed the lid shut. The fingers vanished. The music stopped. The room's temperature returned to normal in an instant. She stood there, shaking violently, the box held at arm's length as if it might explode. She ran from her apartment that night, leaving the box on her kitchen table, and checked into a hotel. She would get rid of it, she decided. She would take it back to the Whitmore house, or donate it to a museum, or leave it on a street corner. Anything to get it out of her life. But when she returned to her apartment the next morning, the box was gone. Margaret tore through her apartment, searching every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. The music box had vanished. Had someone broken in? Had it been stolen? But nothing else was missing. Her laptop, her jewelry, her cash, all still there. Only the box was gone. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt a growing sense of dread, as if something fundamental had changed, and she couldn't quite identify what. 3 days later, she received a call from her sister, Linda, who lived across the bay in Oakland. Linda was excited. She'd found the most beautiful antique at a little shop in Berkeley, a music box made of ebonwood with mother-of-pearl inlays. She was calling to ask if Margaret thought it was valuable. Margaret's blood turned to ice. "Linda, where did you find it? Which shop?" "Oh, some tiny place I'd never been to before. I was just walking by and saw it in the window, almost like it was waiting for me. The shop owner said someone had just donated it that morning. Isn't that lucky? I paid almost nothing for it." "Linda, listen to me very carefully. I need you to get rid of that box right now. Don't open it, don't keep it in your house. Take it somewhere and leave it, please." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Margaret, are you feeling okay? It's just a music box." "Linda, I'm serious. That box is dangerous. I know this sounds crazy, but..." "You're right. It does sound crazy. Look, I have to go. The movers are here with Oliver's new bed. I'll talk to you later." She hung up. Margaret tried calling back, but Linda didn't answer. She drove to Oakland immediately, breaking every speed limit, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. She had to get to her sister's house. She had to destroy that box before 3:47 a.m. came around again. She arrived at Linda's house just after noon. Her sister's car was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. Margaret used her spare key to let herself in, calling out as she entered. "Linda, Oliver, where are you?" The house was silent, unnaturally silent. No television sounds, no footsteps, nothing. Margaret moved through the rooms with increasing panic until she reached Linda's bedroom. Her sister was sitting on the bed, staring at the music box in her hands. Beside her sat Oliver, Linda's 7-year-old son, equally transfixed. They both looked pale, almost gray, with dark circles under their eyes as if they hadn't slept in days. But it had only been a few hours since they'd spoken. "Linda?" Margaret whispered. Linda slowly turned her head. When she spoke, her voice sounded distant, dreamy. "They want to come out, Margaret. The children. They've been trapped for so long. We need to let them out." No, Linda, put the box down. Listen to me." But Linda wasn't listening. She was opening the box, lifting the lid slowly while Oliver watched with wide, unblinking eyes. The lullaby began to play, and Margaret heard the children's voices again, clearer now than ever before. They were singing in German, the same words engraved on the brass plate. Für die Kinder, die nie schlafen werden, for the children who will never sleep. And Margaret suddenly understood. The children in the box weren't trying to escape. They were inviting others to join them. Klaus Bergman hadn't brought his children back. He'd created a prison, a place where children's souls could be collected, added to the chorus, trapped in an eternal lullaby of suffering. Margaret lunged forward and grabbed the box from Linda's hands, slamming it shut. Linda and Oliver both gasped, as if coming out of a trance. Oliver began to cry. Linda blinked rapidly, confusion and horror dawning on her face. What just happened? Margaret, I felt like I was drowning. Like something was pulling me down into dark water. Margaret didn't answer. She was already moving, carrying the box outside. She had to end this. She remembered reading about the toymaker, Klaus Bergman. The story said he died in a fire in his workshop with his creations. Fire. That was the key. She built a fire in Linda's backyard fire pit, a large one using every piece of wood and kindling she could find. As the flames grew, she held the music box over them, preparing to drop it in. The box grew warm in her hands, then hot, but she held on. Just as she was about to release it, the lid flew open on its own. The lullaby played one final time, but now it was different. The children's voices weren't singing anymore. They were screaming in agony or perhaps in rage. The sound was so horrible that both Linda and Oliver covered their ears, and neighbors began opening their windows to see what was wrong. Margaret dropped the box into the flames. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fire flared bright white, so bright they had to look away. The screaming reached a crescendo that seemed to shake the very air. And then, silence. Complete and absolute silence. When Margaret looked back, the fire had died down to normal. The music box was gone. Not burned to ashes, but simply gone, as if it had never existed. That should have been the end of the story. Margaret wanted it to be the end. But 3 weeks later, she received a message from a user on an antique collectors forum. Someone in Tokyo had just posted photos of an unusual music box they'd found at a flea market. Made of ebonwood, inlaid with mother of pearl with a German inscription on the brass plate. Margaret zoomed in on the photo, her hands shaking. It was the same box, exactly the same. Every detail identical. She immediately sent a message warning the person not to open it, explaining its history, begging them to destroy it. The user never responded. 2 months later, Margaret was searching Japanese news sites when she found a brief article. A family in Tokyo, 4 people, had all died within a week of each other. Unexplained medical emergencies. The only unusual detail mentioned was that neighbors had reported hearing strange music coming from the apartment every night at 3:47 a.m. Margaret has spent the last 15 years tracking the box. She's documented its appearances in 7 different countries. 43 deaths can be directly linked to families who've owned it. Each time someone tries to destroy it, it simply reappears somewhere else, waiting for the next unsuspecting buyer. The most disturbing part? The number of children's voices in the lullaby keeps growing. Margaret has recordings from 1987 and recordings from last year. She's counted the voices. In 1987, there were 13 distinct voices singing in the melody. Now, there are 57. 2 weeks ago, Margaret received a call from an estate sale company in San Francisco, the same city where this nightmare began. They'd been hired to liquidate a storage unit whose owner had died without any heirs. Among the items they'd found was an unusual music box, ebonwood with mother-of-pearl inlays. They were planning to put it up for auction, high-end collectors only. Margaret begged them not to sell it. She offered to buy it herself for any price. The company representative was polite but firm. They had a legal obligation to their client's estate to get the maximum value. The auction was already scheduled. It takes place tomorrow night. The starting bid is $5,000. Margaret knows it will sell. It always does. Someone will take it home, place it on a shelf, and wait for 3:47 a.m. to arrive. And somewhere, in that space between sleep and waking, where the line between the living and the dead grows thin, the children trapped inside the Ebonwood Music Box will sing their lullaby once more, waiting for the lid to open all the way, waiting for the next soul to join their eternal chorus. Margaret still wakes up every night at 3:47 a.m., listening to the silence of her apartment, waiting for a music that hasn't returned yet. She knows it's only a matter of time, because she's realized something that keeps her awake long after that cursed hour has passed. She opened the box, she looked inside. She saw the fingers reaching out. And now, sometimes in the mirror, in photographs, in the reflection of windows at night, she sees something behind her. Small shapes, shadows that shouldn't be there. The children aren't just in the box anymore, they're following her. So here's the question that nobody can answer, the question that Margaret Chen has been asking herself for 15 years. The question that might determine whether you're safe in your own home tonight. If the children inside the music box are collecting souls, adding voices to their never-ending lullaby. What happens when someone who's seen inside, someone who's heard the screaming, someone who's felt those tiny fingers reaching out? What happens when that person finally falls asleep and doesn't wake up? Do they join the chorus too? And if the box can appear anywhere, in any country, in any shop, waiting for the next innocent buyer, how do you know you haven't already seen it? How do you know it's not already in your home waiting for 3:47 a.m.?